Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping headfirst into one of the most complex, most mysterious visions in ancient literature. It's a prophecy from the book of Daniel that has frankly puzzled scholars for centuries. We're talking cosmic conflict, symbolic beasts, and a prophetic countdown. So let's get into it. The vision just kicks off with this incredibly intense scene. You have this powerful ram, totally dominant, seems unstoppable, and then it's just violently and suddenly confronted. The language here is brutal. It describes a complete, crushing defeat. This isn't just a fight, it's an annihilation. So, what in the world are we supposed to make of this? A ram with two horns versus this furious, one-horned goat. This isn't just some bizarre animal fight. The text itself tells us these are symbols for huge empires and world-changing events. So, our mission here is to decode what this ancient vision is really all about. Okay, so let's start by breaking down the main players in this whole prophetic drama. The vision lays out a sequence of world powers, and each one is represented by a specific animal. So first up, we've got this ram, and the text is super clear. It tells us this represents the Medo-Persian Empire. Those two horns, they symbolize the two parts of the kingdom, first Media and then the more powerful Persia. And for a while, this ram is unstoppable, just conquering everything in its path. But then, bam! Out of nowhere, a goat comes flying in from the west, moving so fast its feet don't even seem to touch the ground. The text says this is Greece, and that single big horn on its head, that's its first king, none other than Alexander the Great. I mean, the speed and the fury of it all perfectly mirrors just how ridiculously fast Alexander conquered the known world. But right after this huge victory, the goat's great horn, Alexander, is suddenly broken right at the height of his power. It's a clear nod to his early death. And in its place, four smaller horns pop up, symbolizing the four kingdoms that his empire was split into. But here's where the vision's focus really shifts. It zooms in on something new, a little horn that sprouts from one of them. And this thing grows into this terrifying, arrogant power that targets the holy people and their sanctuary, the Jerusalem temple. And this brings us to the central mystery of the whole vision. The ram and the goat? They're clearly identified. But this little horn power, this is the real antagonist of the story. So who is it? This is the prophetic whodunit we're here to solve. Now, for centuries, there's been one main suspect for the identity of this little horn. It's the answer you'll find in most history books and commentaries. And that guy is Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He was a Greek king from one of those four successor kingdoms, and he was known for brutally persecuting the Jews. He's famous for desecrating the Jerusalem temple by sacrificing a pig on its altar. So, on the surface, he seems like a pretty good fit, right? A wicked ruler who attacks the sanctuary. But does he really fit all the prophetic details? If you look closer at the specific language of the vision, well, the case for Antiochus starts to get a little shaky, and the clues start pointing in a completely different direction. All right, so let's put on our detective hats here. We're going to act as forensic investigators and look at three key clues from the text that really challenge that traditional interpretation and build a case for a totally different culprit. Okay, clue number one, you got to look at the animals themselves. The vision doesn't use lions or bears like in other prophecies. Nope, it uses a ram and a he-goat. Now, crucially, these aren't just any animals. They are these specific animals used for offerings in the Jerusalem temple. And that is not a coincidence. It completely reframes the conflict. This isn't just about politics or war. It's about the very heart of worship. Clue number two centers on this phrase, the continual. Now that refers to the constant daily cycle of sacrifices that were like the lifeblood of temple worship. The little horn is said to take this away. But here's the critical difference. A foreign invader like Antiochus could stop the offerings from the outside, sure. But the prophecy describes something way more insidious. It's a power that takes control of the continual, twisting it through rebellion from within. This implies an inside job. And the third clue, well, this one's a real smoking gun. The text says the little horn becomes mighty, yet not by his own power. Think about what that means. It's not a self-made power. It's a client state, a puppet ruler, whose authority is given to it and backed up by a much bigger empire. Antiochus? He was the head of his own empire. He ruled by his own might. This description points to someone else entirely. So, if it's not Antiochus, who is it? Well, with these three clues, a focus on the sanctuary, an internal corruption of worship, and a power that comes from another empire, the source text points the finger at a brand new suspect, the Herodian dynasty. And when you put them side by side, the contrast is, well, it's pretty stark. Antiochus was an external Greek king. The Herods were an internal power. Antiochus ruled by his own might. The Herods were puppet kings for Rome, ruling not by his own power. Antiochus attacked the temple from the outside. The Herods corrupted it from the inside, controlling the priesthood. And finally, the horn opposes the chief of chiefs. While Antiochus persecuted the people, the Herods directly confronted the one Christians identify as the Messiah. You see how the puzzle pieces just seem to click into place much better for the Herods? Okay, but there's one more giant piece of this puzzle we need to look at, a really cryptic timeline. The vision asks how long this desecration is going to last, and the answer is a very, very specific number. The angel gives the duration as 2,300 evenings and mornings. Now, a lot of people have tried to make this fit a literal 2,300-day period in the time of Antiochus, but it's always been a bit of a stretch. The source here proposes something different, that 2,300 isn't just a literal count, but a deeply symbolic number that's rooted in Israel's own history. So where does this symbolism even come from? Well, the number 23 actually tops up in key moments of temple desecration and restoration in the Hebrew scriptures. You have the wicked Queen Athaliah, who usurped the throne and defiled the temple for a reign that lasted about 2,300 days. Later on, the good King Jehoash delayed repairing the temple for 23 years. So the number itself functions like a prophetic code for a period of internal corruption that ultimately ends with the sanctuary being set right. And this is where it gets really incredible. That symbolic number becomes a literal and stunningly accurate timeline. In AD 64, the massive decades-long rebuilding of the temple by the Herods was finally finished. This moment, controlled by a corrupt priesthood, represented the fullness of apostasy. So what happened roughly 2,300 days, or about 6.5 years later? In AD 70, the Roman army completely destroyed that very temple. The countdown ends with a final, fiery vindication. So, shifting the bad guy from an external enemy to an internal one dramatically changes the entire point of the prophecy. Let's talk about why this interpretation really matters. You see, ultimately, this interpretation turns the prophecy inward. It stops being a history lesson about foreign empires and becomes this piercing critique of the failure within God's own chosen people, specifically its leadership. The greatest threat wasn't some external king. It was an internal corruption that perverted the nation's entire purpose. And the stakes here couldn't be higher. Israel's calling was to be a priestly nation for the whole world. So the failure of that calling, the corruption of its priests and its worship, it wasn't just some local problem. In the worldview of this prophecy, it was a cosmic crisis that threatened the very fabric of creation. And that leaves us with a final, really challenging thought. We often look for enemies on the outside, right? For the next great threat on the horizon. But this reading of Daniel 8 suggests that maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous prophecies are the ones that act like a mirror, warning us about the little horn, that arrogant, corrupting power that can rise from within our own ranks.